Yesterday, I talked to you about forgiving others who've transgressed against you and how important that is. And as we look at this in Proverbs chapter 17 and verse 9, we understand that, God wants us to forgive. In fact, God outright commands us to forgive other people that have transgressed against us. Now, when we look at that, something that we need to understand, and something that we need to be mindful of, is that two wrongs do not make a right. We know that person transgressed against us. We know that person hurt us. Maybe it was a deep wound. Maybe it was a deep hurt. They hurt us very, very badly. But to turn around and do the same thing to them is not going to make the situation right. In fact, it's going to make it much, much worse. And what's going to happen is you're going to get caught up in that circular motion to where you're going to hurt them, they're going to hurt you, you're going to hurt them, they're going to hurt you, and it's going to be this tit for tat that's just going to continue to go back and forth, and you're going to continue that spiral downward to where you're both going to wind up destroying one another. And so not only are you not going to forgive them, you're always going to be looking for ways that you can harm them. So yesterday we looked at the first part of Proverbs chapter 17 and verse 9. It says, "He who conceals a transgression seeks love." And the rest of that verse says, "But he who repeats a matter separates intimate friends." Marriages have come to bitter ends. People who loved each other and loved each other dearly, would die for one another, would do anything for one another, have come to bitter ends because they have allowed themselves to get caught up in that vicious spiral of being at one another's throats. And then, if you put things in reverse and you go backwards to the beginning of when all of that started, and you look at the original hurt, and it really doesn't matter whose fault it was, but you go back to the original hurt, and it probably wasn't that big of a deal. But even if it was a big deal, and you didn't act biblically and forgive the individual of what they did, and you didn't do your part, then you didn't put things in motion to where healing could come about. Instead, you turned around and you brought back to them what they did to you, and possibly even worse. And possibly what they did to you wasn't even intentional. Maybe they said a word. Maybe they lost their temper. Who knows? It could have been 1,000 different things. But you very intentionally went out of your way to hurt them. Now, what that does, the Bible tells us right here, that he who repeats a matter separates intimate friends. It was an intimate friend. It was a close friend. You had that loving relationship. And because you chose to do it. Yes, they may have initiated the transgression, but then you chose to not act biblically, and you chose to put back on them what they gave to you, and maybe even worse, probably even worse, because you're mad, you're infuriated now. And now that situation isn't going to get any better. It's going to just continue to spiral out of control until somebody decides to be an adult and say, "Hey, let's stop all of this foolishness." But most of the time, that's not going to take place because you're now embittered towards one another. And you've separated intimate friends. It happens in families very often. Happens amongst close friends very often, intimate friends. Friends, let's not get to that point. See, the Bible tells us not to let the sun go down on our anger. There's a reason why the Bible tells us not to let the sun go down on our anger, because if we go ahead and act biblically, go ahead and forgive that person that day, that moment, that second. Go ahead and forgive them. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. You're not going to give opportunity and rise to the devil to continue to pour salt on that wound and allow a root of bitterness to be set in your heart to where that situation will spiral out of control. Go ahead, be biblical, be Christ-like, and forgive them. Remember Jesus on the cross of Calvary? "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.